All right, welcome folks. It's a little bit after 2, so we'll get started with our Cultural Recovery Grant Seeker Workshop. So excited to be here with you all. I'm Katherine Sims, and I am working to support the Vermont Humanities and Arts Council in this new grant program initiative, and I'll be walking through the grant and then we'll make some time for some questions and answers at the end of this webinar. So let's dive in. We are here to talk about the Cultural Recovery Grant Program, and the focus of the recovery grants is to provide both arts and humanities organizations who are facing financial hardship as a result of the pandemic additional funding. This is a partnership between the Humanities and Arts Council and made possible through federal ARPA funds from the National Endowment of the Humanities and National Endowment of the Arts. And I think I want to call attention right at the beginning to the fact that this program is a little unique, unlike other programs that may offer project-based support. The recovery funds are intended to support your general operating costs. So that means rent, utilities, staff, the boring stuff that grants don't always cover. And so we really encourage you in your application to take advantage of this opportunity. Use other grants for the new shiny programs. If you can apply all of this funding to rent in one big chunk, we encourage that. This is an opportunity to help your organization weather and recover from COVID. So that's sort of the kind of key focus of this grant. Want to talk a little bit about eligibility. So in order to be eligible for this program, your organization needs to be a registered 501c3 nonprofit with tax exempt status. It needs to be an arts or humanities organization. That may be an organization that operates under an umbrella of a college or a university with 501c3 status. There are some cases where a nonprofit organization may not strictly be a humanities organization, but if you offer humanities programming, you may be eligible for project support through this program. Public libraries may apply for humanities-based program funding only. So that would not be the general operating support, but libraries are eligible for their humanities-specific programming. Just to dive into a little bit more in terms of the distinction between arts and humanities and what types of organizations are eligible. So an arts organization is one that offers year-round high-quality arts programming and services. A humanities organization offers year-round high-quality humanities programs and services. And the Vermont Humanities has a pretty broad definition for that, including organizations that focus on history or cultural or ethnic studies, journalism, leadership programs, museums, libraries, all would be eligible under the humanities umbrella. And I'd be happy to talk offline with anyone specifically about whether their program or their organization would qualify under that definition. Awards through this program will be made either by the Vermont Arts Council or the Vermont Humanities Council, or potentially for some organizations, both. And as you go through the application process, you'll be able to indicate whether you're applying for arts, humanities, or both, or funding from both. One thing I want to be sure to call attention to is even if you have already received other recovery funding, you are still eligible to apply for this grant. And so that would include the previous round of this funding in 2020, the Cultural Relief Grant Program, or any of the programs offered through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development or other state or federal grants. Even if you've received funding, you can still apply for this additional recovery support. You also can still apply for other Arts Council and Humanities grants programs, such as the Arts Impact or Humanities Project grants. So this would be an additional grant opportunity for arts and humanities organizations. In terms of who is not eligible to apply, unfortunately, the decision was made by NEH and NEA that organizations without a 501c3 status are not eligible to apply. So even if you have a fiscal agent, unfortunately, you are not able to apply. We would direct folks to the new state economic bridge grant programs as a good source of funding for organizations that do not have 501c3 status. Again, libraries would be ineligible for general operating support, but are able to apply for the humanities programs. And you'll see the list of additional ineligible applicants here on this slide. This grant program will award special consideration to organizations that are serving or led by members of communities that are traditionally underrepresented in arts and humanities. And you'll see a list here, including LGBTQ individuals or indigenous populations or those who live in rural areas. The intent is to really try to reach a diverse audience, especially those who are underrepresented. And so we'd love to hear in your application about how your organization is serving or led by these communities. First-time applicants are also encouraged to apply. The grant awards are 3 levels that are based on your annual operating budget. So organizations under $250,000 in their annual operating budget are eligible for a $5,000 grant. If you're between $250,000 and $750,000, there's a $10,000 award, and over $750,000, you're eligible for $15,000 grant award. And the application portal will ask you to upload your profit and loss statement from 2019. We're skipping 2020, recognizing that that year might be a little anomalous for many organizations because of the pandemic. And so we want to see your annual operating budget from kind of the most recent, quote, normal year. And if it's a calendar year budget, that's great. If you're on a July 1st to June 30th budget, that's fine. So you're whatever completed fiscal year from 2019 is what we'll be looking at to determine annual budget size. One thing I want to additionally note here is that funding from this grant may be used to cover retroactive expenses incurred after March 15th. So just one thing to keep in mind as you're applying is you can use that funding on retroactive expenses. And there is no match requirement for this grant. To dig into the use of funding a little bit more, there is a different set of eligible funding uses for arts and humanities grants, and I'll walk you through that here. So arts organizations can apply for general operating support, and this needs to be for the day-to-day business expenses of your organization. And that's so that means not a new or a special program. General operating support for your core activities, including things like staff salaries, fees or stipends for artists, facility costs, rent, additional PPE or hand sanitizer or other health and safety supplies needed because of the pandemic, or marketing and promotional costs. So this funding can go to support the core of your work, and we encourage you to lean into that. For humanities organizations, you can apply for general operating costs similar to arts. So your staff, your rent, your marketing, your utilities. You also can apply for humanities programming funding. And so this might be for an organization that has a broader mission, but has a specific line of programming focused on humanities. And so you could apply this grant funding towards that programming. You'll also see some other eligible activities here unique to humanities: the strategic planning as a result of COVID-19, technical or consultant support in terms of transitioning to digital technology to increase access of your programming, expansion of outdoor or virtual programming because of COVID-19, or equity assessments and planning related to the pandemic. Funds cannot be used for a few things. You can read the full list here, but noting again that March 15th date, that funding expenses incurred before that would be ineligible. Re-granting is not an eligible activity, and obviously using this funding for something that you already have other funds, grant funds covering. The grant panel will be looking at a number of things in terms of awarding these grant funds. We are looking for a demonstrated need of financial hardship due to COVID, and that's supposed to say 19. There, such as a risk of permanent closure of your organization, significant loss of revenue, having to lay off or furlough your staff or volunteers, a loss of revenue or workspace. So we want to hear from you the story of how the pandemic has affected hardship for your organization if it has experienced that. Overall, the grant review team will be looking for a diverse range of organizations, disciplines, geography, and background. So across all the grants, going to be looking to support a diversity of programming and organizations with this funding. The grant review will also include looking at sort of the quality of your organization's work, your ability to carry this out, how your work impacts the workforce in your community and within your organization, the appropriateness of the work to the mission of the organization. We'd love to hear about how you're thinking about compensation for artists and presenters. Is it fair and appropriate? And we really want to hear how you're engaging underserved populations, as the special consideration slide noted. Yeah, let's see, keep going. The grant review panel process includes 4 external reviewers from different organizations and disciplines, along with staff from the Vermont Humanities and Arts Councils. After the deadline, the panelists will use the criteria that we just went over to evaluate and score proposals. We will be meeting shortly after the deadline for each round to discuss recommendations and getting back to you about your application. Some important dates that I want to highlight. There are 2 rounds for this application or this grant program. The first round is July 21st, and then the second round, September 14th. Any applicant who is not funded in round 2 will automatically roll over and be considered again in round 2. And so therefore we encourage you to get in your application as soon as possible. If you can get it in by round 1, you'll have the opportunity to have sort of two bites at the apple. So if you're able to get your application in by July 21st, that said, we added the second round knowing that summer can be a really busy time for our arts and humanities organizations, and that you just may have too much going on to pull together an application so quickly. And then we have the second date for folks who might fall into that category. Grant-funded activities must begin by December 1st of this year and must end no later than November 30th of next year. That is also the same, that's the deadline of the final report. So November 30th, 2022 is when we'll be asking you to report on the work funded through this grant program. We will be following up with everyone who submits an application within 2 to 4 weeks of submission to let you know the status of your application. In terms of tips for preparing a strong application, we encourage you to start it well before the deadline so that you know that you can get into the portal and that you have everything you need to put together an application, and there's enough time to go back and forth if there are questions. Please don't assume anything. The reviewers may not be familiar with your organization or your region or your programming, so please be explicit as possible and don't make any assumptions about the readers. We encourage you to be clear and direct, and really want to highlight that for this application, our goal is to get the dollars out there as quickly as possible to the organizations that need it. And so we're looking to hear from you in your own words, the story of your organization, what this pandemic has been like for you, and how you see your organization recovering and moving forward. We're less interested in a perfect and polished application and more hearing your story. So you do not need to be a development professional to apply. We'll note that all applications funded need to comply with access policies and laws, knowing that we want arts and humanities program to be inclusive and ensure that everyone who is interested is able to participate. There will be a final report requirement. As I said, that will be due November 30th, 2022. And here's a sense of some of the things that we're going to be looking for in that final report. And so data around the total number of people that attended in person, including or differentiated by youth, adults, artists, scholars, as well as race and ethnicity data as you were able to gather it. We're also going to be looking for you to be tracking your online audience participation reached, as well as where the funds went, who was paid with the grant program, a sense of future losses that your organization may be anticipating. And we are very eager to have your stories and photos about how these dollars were put to good use in your community. And so please take as many photos as you can and make sure that the high quality ones get to us at the end of this. So that's just a preview of the types of things we're hoping you're tracking if you are awarded a grant through this program. And I'm going to take a second now to shift towards walking to the online portal. Want to make sure that everyone can find the application easily, and since it is a new online grant portal, want to make sure that folks are familiar with this new site. So you can access the grant application on both the Vermont Arts Council and the Vermont Humanities websites. This is what the Arts Council site looks like. You'll see up at the top, there's a tab for grants. Click on that. On the right-hand corner, there's all the contact information, guidelines, and a link to apply. Here's what it looks like on the Vermont Humanities website. Go to COVID-19 recovery, and there's a button right in the middle there that says apply for a cultural recovery grant. On the sidebar, there's all the guidelines, frequently asked questions, and other resources to help you navigate your application. So this is really important. There is a completely new and different online grant system. And so when you click to apply, you'll automatically be directed from both sites to this new system. Even if you have applied for a grant with the Vermont Arts or Humanities Council before, your login credentials will no longer work. And so you will need to set up a new account and password, and that can take some time. Your information needs to be approved by the grant portal administrator, and that can sometimes take 1 or 2 days for approval to recur. So we highly encourage everyone to start their application well before the deadline, so you can go through this process and you're not trying to apply on the day that it's due and not able to get set up in the system. So you'll see there's a circle down there at the bottom where it says register. You're going to want to hit that button. Again, even if you've applied recently for an Arts Council or Humanities Council grant, you will still need to register. You will be asked to fill in your contact information. And since you're applying on behalf of an organization, you want to provide a work email address. If possible, don't add info@ vermonthumanities.com. We want something that will specifically get to you. And note that you'll want to check the checkbox organization applicant at the bottom, because you are applying on behalf of an organization. That will direct you to this page where you're going to associate your name with an organization. You can start by entering the organization into the search window at the top there, and it will automatically pull up the organization if it's already in the system. And then you can click on that organization name, and it will take you to the registration screen. This is what that registration screen will look like. And then under contact information, you can click on copy from organization to populate the contact fields for that organization. And then you can hit register at the bottom. So search for your organization, click on it, copy from organization, and then register. If your organization does not exist when you search for it, then you can click create new organization and fill in all the required information. You can then click on the blue register button at the bottom. Once you are in the system, you'll be redirected to the main page of the grant portal that looks like this. And your name, you'll see Meredith Bell is logged in here for the Vermont Arts Council. Your name and organization should appear under the photo banner. All new users for organizations require approval before you can access an application. And so you won't be able to see the application at all until your access is approved. And again, that can take 1 to 2 days. So please go through this process before the deadline. Once you are approved, you should see this organization applicant as a menu option after logging in. Click on any of the menu items to see the features that are available. To access grants, you either hover over the organization applicant or click on available grants. And click on available grants or click on the grant title under the featured applications. Either option will take you to the grant application. Once you are in the grant application, you can preview the application by clicking through the tabs. You can see the green guidelines is highlighted right now. All of those tabs walk you through the application. And you can navigate through that as you want. And then before you submit, you will have to have answered all of the required questions. At any time, you can save your application and go back to it. Again, here's another example of a different tab. So this is the summary, what it looks like. Here is a screenshot of the where you'd access your saved application. So you can go back to it once you've started. Once you've submitted, you will no longer be able to make any changes. So that's a kind of brief rundown of the new online portal. Thanks everyone for your patience getting that set up. The system is much more user-friendly and easier to navigate on the back end. So we're excited to have that available for you all. I am available Monday and Wednesdays for 30-minute check-in calls. You can book a time from either the Humanities or Arts web pages for this grant program. I'm also available by email. There's my email and phone number. We really welcome conversations in advance of your application. My role is to really help you put together the strongest application possible. And so please don't hesitate to reach out either through booking a time or sending me an email. As Ryan mentioned, we're going to put this recording and the slides up on the website so you can go back to them at any time. And that's all I have for you right now. So would love to shift to questions and answers. What's come up for you as you've tried to navigate this? And I'll try my best to answer them or get back to you.
All right, so we have one here. And again, if everyone who has a question can type them into chat, we'll try to stay on top of those. First question, is a small museum that's open 6 months of the year eligible?
Yes, we are excited to serve humanities organizations and a museum that would be an eligible applicant. Again, if you have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID.
Okay, if an organization was founded in 2019, are they eligible for this program since they won't have a full year reflected on the 2019 P&L, profit and loss?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe something that, it would be helpful to dive into the specifics a little bit more. And so if that person wants to reach out to me, we can talk that through. But I think, again, if you're able to, from March of 2020, demonstrate financial hardship, you would be eligible to apply. And we can talk about how to find the financial history necessary to apply.
Do outdoor events need to be fully ADA accessible? The person who writes says, we do a theater event in our fields, forest, along a trail that is not easily accessible for folks with mobility issues.
That's a great question. And I'm going to have to defer to others within the arts and humanities organizations on the details of those accessibility requirements. But if you can follow up with me by email, I can make sure you get a copy of those guidelines and policies.
Okay, question from Taylor. If my organization will be asking for general operating support, is it important to specify which form that support will take, staffing, rent, etc., in the application?
Yeah, so each grant recipient receives a lump sum based on organizational size. So you are not submitting a budget as a part of your application, but we are asking you to tell us in narrative form how the funds will be used. And then we'll be following up with the final report to hear from you directly how funding was used. So you do not need to put forward a line item budget of how you'll be using your general operating funds. As long as you are sticking within the eligible uses of funding, you are good to go.
John asks, while our organization is not registered in Vermont, all of our programs are Vermont-based. Are we eligible?
Unfortunately, the answer to that one is no. You must be a Vermont-based 501c3 organization to apply.
Stephanie asks, if we are a museum that is part of a university and we do not have our own financial statements, how do you suggest reporting those profit loss statements and audited financial statements? Should they use the universities, which wouldn't really show theirs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we are interested in understanding the size and scope of the organization, and not the full university. And so I think having a profit and loss, if at possible, for the kind of sub-organization would tell the best story about the scope of your work. And so again, we could talk offline about what you have available and how to get that information to the grant review team.
Linda asks for more clarity on what time period this grant covers.
Yeah, so sorry, I've mentioned different dates, created some confusion there. So the grant funds can be used to cover expenses that are that occur March 15th, 2021 of this year through the grant period, which ends November 30th, 2022. So these funds can go towards expenses during that period. We are asking you to tell us about your demonstrated need for this funding by looking back since the beginning of the pandemic. So as you reflect on losses that your organization has had to date and the need for this additional funding, we want you to look back to the beginning of the pandemic. But the funding can be used for our expenses March 15th of this year through November 30th, 2022.
Question from Dorothy. See if I can get this right. And Dorothy, maybe we need a few more details in chat. We can swing back by, but maybe Katherine will understand this. Is a small library support 501c3? And maybe that's like a Friends of the Library organization that is a nonprofit. So a 501c3 that supports a small library, are they able to apply for these grants?
So libraries, or I would say organizations that are supporting libraries, are eligible for humanities programming funding. So not general operating support, but if your organization is offering a book reading or a bookmobile or inviting a humanities scholar and stuff like that, type of specific humanities programming would be eligible for a grant.
All right, just feel like we're peppering you with questions, but I guess that's what you're here for. So Susan asks, I understand that libraries are not eligible for general support, but only for humanities programming. Would salaries for employees who are providing the specific humanities programming be eligible for this grant?
Yes, that would qualify as an expense related to that humanities program and not a general operating activity. So general operating support we would generally think of as expenses that cannot be tied directly to a specific program, like your rent or your utilities or your insurance. But if staff are working specifically on a humanities-based program, that would be an eligible expense.
Maria asks, can two partner organizations apply for funds to apply to a shared project?
I think we would not want to receive two applications from two different organizations for the same program. But if a eligible arts or humanities organization is applying on behalf of a project that they are collaborating with others on, I think that's in fact something that the review committee would be very excited to see. I think we ask in the grant applications to hear about your collaborations and how you're working with others. And so in that case, we would, I think, want one application from the lead organization to support the humanities program or general operating support of the organization.
So you may not know this. This might be a question for the Arts Council, but maybe you do. Judith asks, her organization submitted an Arts Impact Grant application in May. Is the Arts Council online application system, was it new then or is it new since May? Do you know?
Good question. I think my understanding is the Arts Impact was done on the new portal. So I would say if you haven't applied in the last 2 months, you will need to submit a new one. Oh, look, Amy's saying, yes, I'm right. So if you have done the Arts Impact, you're good to go with the new portal. Otherwise, please make sure you bake in time to apply to set up your organization and your contact information on the new portal.
And Amy, I might direct you to a comment by Francis about logging into the Arts Council portal. At least I'm not that familiar with it. It says home, my account, and sign out. So I would just put a pin in this, and either Amy or Meredith or someone else from the Arts Council can perhaps loop back with Francis.
Sounds like it's already been answered. And I would say any kind of technical questions, if you're having trouble with the portal or the application, Meredith Bell is the point of contact there. And maybe we can put that in the chat so that folks can see that. Please direct all technical questions on the website to her. Thanks.
Rebecca asks, hi, we're an art and humanities organization applying for general operating support for an event. We should be able to track the in-person population served, but we may not have an online component. Do we still need to include info on our online audience in our final report?
Yeah, the level of detail required for reporting on in-person versus online is different, recognizing that it can be very challenging to know the numbers and the demographics of who's following online. And so for the in-person, we ask that you identify adults and youth and race and ethnicity and exact numbers as possible. The online audience, we are asking to estimate to the best of your ability.
Kim asked for you to talk a little more about funding. I assume this is choosing which funding to request, whether it's from Vermont Arts Council, Vermont Humanities, or both. What does it mean? What are the differences between those three options?
Yeah, so I think you want to look at the eligibility of your organization. If your organization exclusively provides arts programming, you apply for the arts funding. If your organization exclusively provides humanities programming, you apply for the humanities. If you do some combination of both, you can apply for both. And know that the grant review committee may shuffle things around, as they need to distribute all of the dollars. So it is, you are not locked into that determination, but we want to have a sense from you about what type of organization you are and what type of programming you're looking to support with this funding.
Dorothy asks, my organization would be asking for the replacement of lost revenue during the COVID-19 period. Would this be allowed?
Yes, that's the example of what this is intended to do. We recognize that this has been a really tough year for everyone, and that arts organizations and humanity organizations, many have had to cancel a lot of programming that you rely on for ticket sales and revenue to carry you through the year, and that much of that was put on hold last year, and that creates real financial hardship for organizations. And so we want to get you dollars to help backfill that challenge so that you can pay your rent, you can pay your staff, you can keep the lights on. So tell us both in numbers and with stories about the hardship your organization has experienced this last year, and what your vision is for recovery and a thriving organization, and how this grant can help get you there.
John asks, does the application specify the demographic categories you expect to be tracked? I assume tracked for the final report.
Yeah, so we are nearly finalized a final draft of the report, and we will make that available on the website in the next couple of days. So you can look at a copy of what we'll be asking you to complete, and we'll make sure that anyone who is awarded a grant also has a copy of the reporting expectations right from the beginning, so you know what you need to be tracking.
And folks probably saw this in the chat, but I'll just bring it to attention if they haven't. Amy writes, just a note for the person from a nonprofit incorporated out of state. All other states have these relief funds, so it would make sense to check with the arts councils and humanity councils in that state for recovery opportunities, in the state where you're registered for recovery opportunities.
Yeah, thanks for that plug. And maybe that's another opportunity to note that NEA also has ARPA fund program that is open right now, and folks are able to apply both for the Vermont funds as well as applying at the federal level. It is certainly a more onerous process to go through that federal application hurdle, but arts organizations should and can certainly look into both and apply for both if that feels right for your organization. Amy, one question I had to defer on, and now that you're here, maybe you can help fill in anything about the accessibility requirements. There was a question earlier about what if trails are not ADA accessible. I don't know if there was any resource that we could direct folks to better understand the accessibility requirements associated with receiving the grant funds.
Susan asks, the application asks specifically about staff layoff. In the case of staff reduction of hours, instead of being laid off entirely, would we count that as layoff or not indicate that as an impact?
Yeah, no, that's definitely an impact. We've heard from many organizations who, have had to cut hours or not maybe extend contracts in the way that they normally would. And so please tell us about that. In the application, it asks you both for numbers about financial loss and also to describe in your own words the impact of this last year. I think there's also some check boxes about how you've handled staffing and furlough and reduction, I believe, is an option distinct from laying off. So please, that absolutely is a part of the story of hardship. And so tell us when you've had to reduce or downsize staff. Yeah, and Amy, I don't think we can, we can promote you to panelist to bring you in on this conversation. Look at us.
Amy might be joining us here shortly. Here she comes. And there's Amy.
Hi, I'm sorry to butt in it, and I just got dropped out for a minute, so sorry for the delay. On the accessibility question, a couple of things. One is there are, I put in the chat the link to the accessibility resources and information that we have on our website. Would also direct you to our my colleague, Michelle Bailey, who is our ADA coordinator. And I would also say that in the question about accessibility, you can explain the accommodations that are available. You can explain the situation for the particular concerts or programming that you have in the field, and the ways that you're communicating to your audience about the accommodations in advance of the event. So it may definitely be workable, just a matter of communicating clearly about what folks can do on the site.
Any remaining questions that Katherine hasn't answered?
Yeah, and Amy, while you're here, is there any clarity or additional comments you'd want to add in terms of my responses to any of the questions?
No, it was all perfect.
I don't know about that, but we're doing the best that we can.
And just a reminder that we will post the video of this hopefully by tomorrow to both the Vermont Humanities and Vermont Arts Council websites, and I expect that we will be able to easily email everyone who registered with a link to that video. And please feel free to share the video and the slides to people who were not able to attend today. It looks like that's about it. We can maybe hang out for another 10 seconds or so.
And I'm just going to share my screen again with a reminder that I am here to help you. We do not want completing the application to be a barrier for anyone, and do not want the focus to be on writing a perfect application, but more getting your story out there. And so please connect with me during my office hours. You can find a link to book a time with me on the Arts and Humanities website pages for this grant application. This is my email and my phone number. I am here to help you get this funding.